Have you ever wondered how just one animal can change an entire ecosystem? Today, I'm going to talk about the food web of Yellowstone National Park and how it changed before wolves were eliminated, while they were gone, and after they were brought back. Yellowstone is a temperate forest and grassland ecosystem in the United States. It has forests with trees like pine and fir, and also open meadows, rivers, and valleys. In this presentation, I'll show how the gray wolf, an apex predator, had a huge impact on plants, herbivores like elk, beavers, and even birds and fish in Yellowstone. Before we zoom into Yellowstone, it helps to review what a food web is. A food web is made of many connected food chains. It usually starts with producers, like plants, that get energy from the sun. Then herbivores eat the plants, carnivores eat other animals, and scavengers and decomposers break down dead organisms. In a food web, everything is connected. If you change one population, like a predator or a plant, it can cause changes all through the web. That's exactly what happened in Yellowstone when wolves were removed and then brought back. Yellowstone has a very rich food web with many different organisms. The producers are the plants, trees like lodgepole pine, spruce, fir, and aspen, plus willows and cottonwoods along rivers, and grasses and wildflowers in meadows. There are also aquatic plants in streams and ponds. Herbivores include large animals like elk, bison, deer, and moose, as well as smaller animals like snowshoe hares and many insects that feed on plants. The predators are animals like gray wolves, coyotes, grizzly and black bears, mountain lions, foxes, and birds of prey such as eagles, hawks, and owls. Finally, scavengers and decomposers include ravens and magpies that clean up carcasses, beetles and other insects that break them down further, and bacteria and fungi in the soil that finish the job. All of these groups are linked in Yellowstone's food web. Before the early 1900s, gray wolves were an important apex predator in Yellowstone. The basic food web looked like this. Producers like grasses, shrubs, willows, aspens, and conifers were eaten by herbivores like elk, bison, deer, moose, and rabbits. Then predators such as wolves, bears, mountain lions, and coyotes hunted those herbivores. Finally, scavengers and decomposers like ravens, eagles, insects, bacteria, and fungi broke down what was left. Wolves played a crucial role in controlling elk and other large herbivore populations. Because elk gnars were limited, they couldn't overgraze sensitive areas, especially riverbanks with young willows and aspens. With plant communities in better shape, there was more habitat for many other species. Beavers had enough willow to eat and to use for building dams. Their ponds created great habitats for fish, amphibians, and aquatic insects. Songbirds could nest in the trees and shrubs. Overall, with wolves present, Yellowstone's ecosystem was more balanced, and biodiversity was higher. By the mid-1800s, wolves had been eliminated from Yellowstone through hunting and predator control programs. When wolves disappeared, one major predator was removed from the food web. Without this top predator, elk populations increased a lot because there was much less predation. With more elk and no wolves to fear, elk spent more time feeding in open valleys and along riverbanks. They especially liked young willow and aspen shoots. This led to overgrazing. Young trees and shrubs were eaten again and again, and many never had the chance to grow into adults. Over time, many riverbanks became barer and more open, with far fewer willows and aspens than before. This change in plant communities set off a chain reaction that affected a lot of other species. The loss of wolves didn't just affect elk and plants. It caused ripple effects throughout the ecosystem. One of the biggest changes was in beaver populations. Beavers depend on willows for both food and for building their dams. When elk overgrazed the willows, there weren't enough young willow shoots for beavers. As a result, many beaver colonies declined or disappeared from certain streams. With fewer beaver dams, there were fewer ponds and wetlands. That meant less habitat for fish, amphibians like frogs, and many aquatic insects. Some bird species that nest or feed in willow and aspen stands also went down in number because their habitat was damaged or lost. Meanwhile, with wolves gone, Coyotes and some other predators expanded because they had less competition. Overall, removing wolves led to a less balanced food web and lower biodiversity in many parts of Yellowstone. In 1985 and 1996, gray wolves were reintroduced to Yellowstone. This was a major ecological experiment. Once wolves returned, they started hunting elk again. This reduced elk numbers, but just as importantly, it changed elk behavior. Elk began to avoid some open valley bottoms and riverbanks where they were more likely to be seen and hunted by wolves. This led to what scientists call a trophic cascade. A trophic cascade happens when changes at the top of the food chain, like a top predator, cause effects that trickle down to plants, herbivores, and other animals. In this case, the presence of wolves indirectly helped plants like willows and aspens, and also helped beavers, birds, fish, and many other species by changing how and where elk fed. After wolves came back and elk behavior changed, some parts of Yellowstone began to recover. In areas where elk now grazed less, willow and aspen stands started to grow back. Along streams, taller willows provided shade and stability for the banks. As willows returned, beaver populations also began to increase again in some places. Beavers had more wood and food, so they built more dams. More beaver dams created more ponds and wetlands. These wetlands became great habitats for fish, frogs, insects, and water birds. Wolves also had effects on other predators and scavengers. Coyotes decreased in some areas where wolves were present because wolves sometimes kill them or outcompete them. On the other hand, scavengers like ravens, magpies, eagles, and even bears benefited from carcasses left by wolf kills. All of these changes helped restore a more complex and balanced food web in Yellowstone and improved biodiversity compared to the time when wolves were gone. Even with wolves back and many parts of the ecosystem recovering, Yellowstone still faces threats. There are natural threats, such as harsh winters, deep snow, and disease. These can cause animal populations like elk or wolves to go up and down from year to year. There are also human-caused threats. Climate change is affecting temperatures, snowpack, and water availability, which changes plant growth and animal migration. Development outside the park, like roads, fences, ranches, and towns, can block migration routes and cause more conflicts between wildlife and people. Wolves and other predators that leave the park may prey on livestock, which can lead to some wolves being killed. Large numbers of tourists can also disturb wildlife if they get too close or damage habitats. Animals are responding by migrating to different areas, changing their routes, or adapting their behavior. For example, elk avoid risky open areas more, and coyotes adjust their territories. Wildlife managers now carefully monitor important species like wolves, elk, and beavers, and they use conservation policies and education to try to keep the ecosystem balanced. Overall, Yellowstone shows how important apex predators like wolves are for maintaining biodiversity and healthy food webs. Biotic factors, such as predation and competition, and abiotic factors, like climate and water, all work together to shape populations. To keep Yellowstone's ecosystem healthy in the future, we need careful conservation and management, and we need to understand how all the parts of the food web are connected.